The scent of pine and wet earth filled my lungs as I trudged deeper into the forest, each step sinking slightly into the moss-covered ground. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving everything glistening and vibrant, the kind of freshness that made the world seem newborn. These woods had always been my refuge, the place I disappeared to when the whispers in town became too much to bear. Today, those whispers had turned to outright stares. "She's odd, that one," they said, not bothering to lower their voices as I passed the market stalls, living alone at the edge of the forest like some witch. I wasn't a witch, just a young woman who preferred the company of trees and wildlife to the judgment of people who had decided long ago that my quietness was something to fear. My pale blonde hair, almost silver in certain light, didn't help matters. In our small village nestled against the ancient forest, anything different was suspicious. My grandmother's pendant bounced gently against my chest as I walked, the smooth stone cool against my skin even through the fabric of my dress. Before she died, she had pressed it into my palm with trembling fingers. "The forest will protect those who protect it," she had whispered, her eyes clear despite her failing body. "Remember that, Alara. It's in your blood." I touched the pendant now, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. Grandmother had been the only one who understood my connection to these woods, who had encouraged rather than feared it. The pendant was a simple thing, a polished river stone wrapped in delicate silver wire, but it was my most treasured possession, my talisman against loneliness. The path I followed wasn't really a path at all, just a winding trail of slightly flattened undergrowth that I had created over years of wandering. It led to a small clearing beside a stream where wild blackberries grew in tangled abundance. I was nearly there when I heard it, a high-pitched whine, followed by a pitiful yipping sound that stopped me in my tracks. I froze, listening. The sound came again, weaker this time. Something was injured. Carefully, I moved toward the sound, pushing aside a curtain of ferns. There, huddled against the exposed roots of a massive oak tree, were 2 wolf pups. Their eyes were barely open, their fur still downy soft, but even I could tell they weren't ordinary wolves. They were larger than any wolf pups I'd seen before, and their fur had an unusual silver sheen that seemed almost to glow in the dappled forest light. One of the pups was clearly injured, its tiny leg bent at an unnatural angle. The other nudged at its sibling, whimpering softly as if trying to comfort it. My heart twisted at the sight. I scanned the area nervously. Where was their mother? A wolf would never abandon her pups unless something had happened to her. The thought sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't leave these helpless creatures to die. Kneeling slowly, I reached into my gathering basket and pulled out the small bundle of supplies I always carried. Herbs, strips of clean cloth, a small flask of water. The uninjured pup growled at me, a sound almost comical coming from such a tiny throat, placing itself between me and its injured sibling. "It's all right," I murmured, keeping my voice low and steady. "I want to help." To my surprise, the pup stopped growling, its unusual amber eyes fixed intently on mine. There was an intelligence there that startled me, an awareness that seemed beyond that of a normal animal. For a moment, I could have sworn I felt something, a strange connection, like a thread of awareness stretching between us. I shook the feeling away. The injured pup needed help, and quickly. With gentle hands, I examined the injured leg. It was broken, but a clean break that could heal if properly set. I had helped the village healer many times before she too had begun to eye me with suspicion. I knew what to do. As I worked, setting the tiny leg with splints made from twigs and binding it with herb-soaked cloths, I spoke softly to the pups, telling them about my grandmother, about the forest, about anything that came to mind. The injured pup whimpered only once during the process, while its sibling watched me with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. "There," I said finally, sitting back on my heels. "That should heal well, but you'll need care." I bit my lip, knowing what I had to do but hesitating nonetheless. Bringing wolf pups into my home, even temporarily, would only fuel the village's suspicions, but I couldn't leave them. As if reading my thoughts, the uninjured pup nudged its sibling gently toward me, then looked up at my face with an expression that seemed almost expectant. "All right then," I whispered, carefully gathering both pups into my basket. cushioning them with the soft cloth I had brought for gathering herbs. "You're coming home with me until we can find your family." The sun was beginning to set as I made my way home, casting long shadows through the trees. My cottage stood apart from the village, a small stone structure with a thatched roof that had belonged to my grandmother and her grandmother before her. Smoke curled from the chimney. I had banked the morning fire before leaving, and it would be easy to bring back to life. Inside, I settled the pups in a nest of blankets near the hearth, fed them drops of goat's milk from a cloth, and tried not to think about what would happen when they grew larger. They fell asleep curled together, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. I was tending to the fire when I felt it. A sudden pressure in the air, as if the atmosphere itself had grown dense. The hairs on the back of my neck rose, and an inexplicable chill raced down my spine. Something was watching my cottage. Moving slowly to the window, I peered out into the gathering darkness. At first, I saw nothing but the familiar outline of trees against the night sky. Then a shadow moved, larger than any normal wolf should be, its eyes reflecting the faint moonlight with an eerie, almost blue glow. My breath caught in my throat, stories flashed through my mind. Tales whispered around village fires about the wolves of the deep forest, creatures that were more than mere animals. Wolves that could think like men, that moved like shadows, that protected the ancient heart of the woods against intruders. Most dismissed such tales as superstition, but my grandmother had believed. "The forest has guardians," she would say, her eyes distant with memory, "and a king who rules them all." The massive wolf remained motionless, watching, and I found I couldn't look away. There was power in that gaze, ancient and wild, and something else, something that made my heart race for reasons I couldn't explain. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf was gone, melting back into the darkness like mist. I remained at the window, staring into the night, my grandmother's pendant warm against my skin. Whatever had just happened, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I had crossed some invisible boundary. I had stepped into a story larger than myself, and there would be no going back. Behind me, one of the pups whimpered in its sleep, and I turned away from the window to check on them. As I knelt beside their makeshift bed, the injured pup opened its eyes and looked at me. And in that moment, I felt the same strange connection I'd experienced in the forest. A sense of recognition, of something aligning, like finding a key that fit a lock I hadn't known existed. "What have I gotten myself into?" I whispered. But even as fear curled in my stomach, there was something else growing alongside it. A sense of rightness, of destiny unfurling. I slept fitfully that night, my dreams filled with running wolves and a pair of human eyes that gleamed with that same eerie blue light I had seen in the forest. I woke at dawn to find the pups awake and alert, the injured one moving its splinted leg with surprising strength. "You heal quickly," I murmured, feeding them more milk. The uninjured pup licked my fingers when I finished, its tiny tongue surprisingly warm against my skin. I couldn't help but smile. That smile faded when I opened my door to collect water from the well and found a dead rabbit on my doorstep, its neck cleanly broken. It was fresh, the body still warm. A gift. Or a message. I looked up sharply, scanning the tree line, but saw nothing unusual. Still, the sense of being watched remained, prickling along my skin like static before a storm. Taking the rabbit, waste not, want not, as grandmother would say. I went about my morning chores, trying to ignore the growing certainty that something fundamental had changed in my world. The pups watched me from their blanket nest, their eyes following my movements around the cottage with that uncanny awareness. It was mid-morning when I heard the knock, not on my door, on the window. 3 sharp taps that made me jump and spin around, my heart in my throat. There, framed in the window, was a face I had never seen before. A man with features so striking they seemed almost carved from stone. High cheekbones, a strong jaw dark with stubble, and eyes that glittered with that same otherworldly blue I had seen in the night. His hair was black as a raven's wing, falling in wild disarray around his face, and though I couldn't see the rest of him clearly through the small window pane, I could tell he was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a cloak made of some dark fur. Our eyes met, and the world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Recognition flashed through me, though I had never seen this man before. I knew him. Somehow, I knew him, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that he had come for the pups. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I stood frozen in the middle of my cottage, a half-peeled potato and knife still in my hands, while he remained at the window, his gaze unwavering. The pups, who had been dozing by the fire, suddenly perked up, their ears forward and alert. The uninjured one let out a small, excited yip. I should have been terrified. There was a stranger at my window, a man who had appeared silently, without warning, whose very presence seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. Instead, what coursed through me was a strange mixture of awe and inevitability. Slowly, I set down the knife and potato, wiped my hands on my apron, and moved toward the door. Something told me that refusing him entry wasn't an option, nor was pretending I hadn't seen him. Whatever was happening had been set in motion the moment I found those pups, perhaps even before. My hand trembled slightly as I lifted the latch, but I kept my chin high as I pulled the door open. Up close, he was even more imposing, towering over me by at least a foot, his shoulders blocking the morning light. The cloak I had glimpsed was indeed fur, but unlike any I had seen before, with a silvery sheen that matched the pups' downy coats. "You have something that belongs to me," he said, his voice deep and rough, as if unused to human speech. There was an accent I couldn't place, something ancient in the cadence of his words. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to step back. They were alone. One was injured. I couldn't leave them to die. His eyes narrowed slightly, assessing me with a predatory focus that made my skin prickle. Most humans would not approach wolf pups, let alone bring them into their den. "I'm not most humans," I replied, the words slipping out before I could consider them. My grandmother's pendant seemed to pulse warmly against my skin, almost in approval. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. He tilted his head slightly, reminding me with a jolt of the way the pups had watched me the previous day. "No," he agreed after a moment. "You are not." He stepped forward, and instinctively I moved back, allowing him to enter my small home. He seemed to fill the space entirely, not just with his physical presence, but with something else. An energy that made the air feel charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The pups began to wiggle excitedly in their nest of blankets, soft whines escaping their throats. The man, though that word seemed inadequate somehow, moved to them with fluid grace, kneeling beside their makeshift bed. His expression softened as he looked at them, revealing a glimpse of something tender beneath the harsh exterior. "You set the leg," he observed, gently examining the splinted limb of the injured pup. "Skillfully. I've helped the village healer before," I said, hovering uncertainly by the table. "With animals and people." He looked up at me, those uncanny blue eyes searching my face. "What is your name?" I hesitated. Names had power. My grandmother had taught me that much. But something told me that refusing to answer would be unwise. "Ilara," I said finally. "Ilara," he repeated, and the sound of my name in his voice sent an inexplicable shiver down my spine. "I am Kieran. No title, no family name, just Kieran." Yet he spoke it with the quiet confidence of someone who needed no other introduction. The pups nuzzled at his hands, clearly recognizing him, though they didn't seem frightened or cowed. If anything, they appeared delighted by his presence. "They're yours?" I asked, though the answer seemed obvious now. A shadow passed over his face. "Their mother was killed 2 days ago. Hunters from beyond the eastern ridge. I was tracking those responsible when these two wandered from the den." Grief and rage mingled in his voice, carefully controlled but detectable nonetheless. I thought of the massive wolf I had seen watching my cottage, the power I had sensed in that gaze, and pieces began to fall into place. "You're not—" I began, then faltered, unsure how to phrase the impossible question forming in my mind. A corner of his mouth curved upward, not quite a smile. "Not what, Ilara? Not human? Not merely a wolf?" He rose to his full height again, and despite the bright morning light streaming through my windows, something of the night seemed to cling to him. What do the people in your village say about the deep forest? My throat went dry. They say it's protected by creatures that are neither fully wolf nor fully man. They speak of a king who rules the pack. The stories had always been told in hushed voices, usually after several cups of ale, tales meant to frighten children into obedience. Stay away from the deep woods. Don't wander too far. Kieran studied me, his expression unreadable. And do you believe these stories? I believe the forest has secrets, I said carefully. My grandmother taught me to respect them. Your grandmother was wise. His gaze dropped to the pendant at my throat, recognition flashing in his eyes. That stone comes from the heartpool, at the center of the deep forest. Few humans have ever seen it. Fewer still have been permitted to take anything from it. My hand went instinctively to the pendant. It was hers. She said it would protect me. Did she now? There was something new in his voice, a speculative tone that made me nervous. What else did your grandmother tell you, Alara? 100 memories flashed through my mind. Grandmother teaching me which plants healed and which harmed, showing me how to move quietly through the undergrowth, telling me to trust my instincts above all else. But most vividly, I remembered her final words, spoken with urgent intensity as life ebbed from her body. She said I belonged to the forest as much as it belonged to me, I whispered. That someday I would understand what that meant. Kieran's eyes never left mine, and in their depths, I saw something shift and settle, like a decision being made. Perhaps that day has come sooner than she anticipated. Before I could ask what he meant, he bent and scooped up both pups with gentle hands. You have my gratitude for saving them. Few of your kind would have shown such courage or compassion. Wait, I said, suddenly reluctant to see them go. I had only had the pups for one night, yet I already felt connected to them, the injured one. The leg needs time to heal properly. It will heal, he said, with absolute certainty. Our kind recover quickly. Our kind. The confirmation of what I had begun to suspect sent a thrill of both fear and fascination through me. This man, Kieran, was indeed what the village stories called a skinwalker. Wolf and man both, ruler of the deep forest pack. And the pups were his children. I should have been terrified. I should have been backing away, crossing myself, reaching for iron or salt or whatever the old tales claimed would ward off such creatures. Instead, I found myself stepping closer, reaching out to stroke the soft head of the injured pup one last time. Will they be all right without their mother? I asked softly. Something vulnerable flashed across Kieran's face, so quickly I almost missed it. The pack raises its young together, he said. They will be cared for, but they will remember you, Alara. As will I. The way he said my name made it sound like a promise, or perhaps a warning. He turned toward the door, pups cradled securely in his arms, and I thought that would be the end of it. A strange encounter, a story I would never be able to tell anyone, a memory that would eventually fade into the half-forgotten realm of dreams. Then he paused at the threshold and looked back at me. The forest remembers those who show it kindness, he said, echoing my grandmother's words so closely that my breath caught. I will return tomorrow at dawn. Be ready. Ready for what? I managed to ask, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. His eyes gleamed, catching the light in a way no human eyes should. To make a choice, Alara. And then he was gone, moving with such fluid speed that it seemed as if he had simply vanished. I stood in the open doorway, staring at the empty path that led into the trees, wondering if I had imagined the entire encounter. But the blankets by the hearth were disturbed, and the scent of pine and something wilder, something untamed, lingered in the air of my cottage. Be ready, he had said, to make a choice. What choice? What could the king of wolf shifters possibly want from me, a simple village woman whose only distinction was her preference for solitude and forest walks? My grandmother's pendant felt warm against my skin, almost pulsing with a life of its own. I closed my fingers around it, seeking comfort in its familiar contours. Whatever was happening, whatever choice lay before me, I sensed that my grandmother had known it might come. Perhaps she had even prepared me for it in her own way. I spent the rest of the day in a state of heightened awareness, every sense seemingly sharper than before. The colors of the forest beyond my window appeared more vivid, the sounds of birds and rustling leaves more distinct. Even my own heartbeat seemed louder, a steady drum marking the passage of hours toward whatever dawn would bring. As night fell, I found myself unable to sleep, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. I sat by the window instead, watching the moon rise over the trees, casting silver light across the clearing where my cottage stood. In that ethereal illumination, I caught glimpses of movement at the forest's edge, shadows that might have been wolves, or something else entirely. They were watching, waiting, just as I was. When exhaustion finally claimed me, my dreams were vivid and strange. I saw myself running through the forest, but not as I was now. In the dream, I moved with impossible speed and grace, the ground flying beneath me, the scents of the night rich in my nostrils. I woke with a gasp just before dawn, the memory of freedom and wild joy still coursing through my veins. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when I heard it, a low, melodious howl that seemed to call directly to something deep within me. It was answered by others, a chorus of voices that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Not with fear, but with a strange, inexplicable longing. Moving as if in a trance, I washed and dressed in my simplest gown. A soft, undyed wool that grandmother had woven years ago. I braided my pale blonde hair back from my face and secured it with a leather cord. The pendant I left where it always was, against my skin, its presence a comfort. I had just finished lacing my boots when a knock came at the door, 3 firm taps, just as before. My heart leapt into my throat, but I moved steadily to answer it, knowing with certainty who I would find waiting. Kieran stood on my doorstep, the rising sun at his back casting his tall figure in dramatic silhouette. He was dressed differently today. Gone was the heavy fur cloak, replaced by simpler attire of dark leather and rough-spun cloth. He looked both more human and somehow less so, his wild nature more evident in the full light of day. "You're ready," he said. And it wasn't a question. His eyes moved over me, taking in my appearance with that same intense focus I remembered from the day before. "You haven't told me for what," I replied, proud that my voice remained steady despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. For the first time, I saw him smile, a slight upward curve of his mouth that transformed his severe features, making him appear younger, almost boyish, for a brief moment. "For a journey, Alara, and for the truth about who you are." The words hung between us, laden with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. The truth about who I am. What could he possibly know about me that I didn't already know myself? "I need to gather my things," I said, stalling for time as I tried to process what was happening. "You need nothing but what you wear," Kieran replied. "The forest will provide the rest." 100 protests rose to my lips, about practicality, about caution, about the sheer madness of following a stranger, a wolf shifter, into the deep forest at dawn. But beneath those rational concerns was a pull that defied explanation, a certainty that this moment had been waiting for me my entire life. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "Trust your instincts above all else, Alara." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the pendant against my skin. "Very well," I said, stepping over the threshold to join him outside. "Lead the way." Kieran nodded once, then turned and strode toward the tree line. His movements were fluid and purposeful, and I found myself hurrying to keep pace with his long strides. As we entered the forest proper, the path narrowed, forcing me to walk slightly behind him. From this angle, I could see that his hair was tied back with a leather cord similar to mine, revealing the strong line of his neck and the breadth of his shoulders. Despite his imposing size, he moved with perfect silence through the underbrush, not even disturbing the morning dew that clung to the ferns and low branches. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, moving steadily deeper into the forest than I had ever ventured before. The trees grew larger here, their trunks wider than 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder, their canopies so dense that the forest floor was dappled with shifting patterns of light and shadow. The air felt different too, richer somehow, filled with scents I couldn't name, and a humming energy that made my skin tingle. Just when I thought my legs would give out from the relentless pace, Kieran stopped so abruptly that I nearly collided with his back. "Listen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I held my breath, straining to hear whatever had caught his attention. At first, there was nothing but the usual forest sounds. Birdsong, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant chatter of squirrels. Then I heard it. A subtle shift in the quality of the silence. A sense of watchfulness that hadn't been there before. "We're not alone," I murmured. Kieran glanced back at me, something like approval in his eyes. "No, we're not." As if summoned by his acknowledgement, shapes began to materialize from between the trees. Wolves, but larger than any I had seen before, their coats ranging from deepest black to purest silver. They moved with deliberate grace, forming a loose circle around us, their intelligent eyes fixed upon me with unnerving focus. My heart raced, but not with fear. There was something almost familiar about their presence, as if I were meeting relatives I hadn't seen since childhood, rather than facing wild predators. "Your pack," I said softly. "My family," Kieran corrected. "My people." A large wolf with russet fur threaded with gray stepped forward, its amber eyes narrowed. It growled low in its throat, the sound clearly directed at me. "Thorn disapproves," Kieran said, sounding almost amused. "He thinks I'm taking an unnecessary risk." The casual way he referred to the wolf by name, interpreting its thoughts as easily as if they had spoken aloud, sent a shiver through me. Risk? What risk? Instead of answering, Kieran continued walking, and the wolves parted to let us pass, falling into formation behind and beside us like an honor guard, or perhaps prison escorts. The russet wolf, Thorn, kept pace beside Kieran, occasionally casting glances back at me that seemed laden with suspicion. "Where are the pups?" I asked, partly to break the tension, partly because I genuinely wanted to know that they were well. "Safe," Kieran replied. "Being cared for by Nyla, who recently had her own litter." The tenderness that crept into his voice when he spoke of the pup stirred something in me. Despite his fierce appearance and the obvious power he wielded, Kieran clearly cared deeply for the young ones. His children, I reminded myself. "Their mother," I said carefully, remembering his grief the day before. "She was my sister," he said, his voice flat, though I sensed the pain beneath. "Lena was second only to me in the pack hierarchy. The hunters who killed her will be found, and they will answer for what they've done." The cold certainty in his tone made me shiver. I had no doubt that Kieran would exact vengeance for his sister's death, and I found I couldn't blame him. Among humans, too, family bonds were sacred. "I'm sorry," I said simply. He nodded once, accepting my condolence without turning to look at me. "It is the way of things, in the borderlands between our world and yours. Humans fear what they don't understand, and fear breeds violence. Not all humans," I said, thinking of my grandmother, of her respect for the forest and its secrets. "No," he agreed, finally glancing back at me. "Not all." The path began to slope downward, leading into a valley I had never seen before. The trees thinned slightly, allowing more light to penetrate, and I gasped at what was revealed. Below us stretched a hidden realm, a wide clearing bisected by a crystalline stream, dotted with stone structures that blended so perfectly with the natural landscape they seemed to have grown from the earth itself. People moved among these dwellings, some in human form, others as wolves, and some in a state of partial transformation that I could only glimpse before they shifted fully one way or the other. "The heart of the deep forest," Kieran said, watching my face as I took in the sight. "Our home for more generations than human memory can contain." "It's beautiful," I breathed, and I meant it. There was a harmony to the settlement, a sense of perfect balance between the natural and the crafted that no human village could match. We descended into the valley, and I became acutely aware of the attention our arrival attracted. Activity paused as we passed, conversations falling silent, all eyes turning to watch our progress. Some gazes held curiosity, others wariness, and a few, particularly from older members of the pack, showed outright hostility. "They don't welcome strangers," I observed quietly. "We haven't had a human visitor in over 50 years, Kieran replied, "and never one who came at my personal invitation." The implications of that statement sent a flutter of nervousness through my stomach. Whatever was happening, it was clearly unprecedented. The weight of expectation pressed down on me, though I still didn't understand what was expected. Kieran led me to the largest of the stone structures, a circular building with a domed roof covered in living moss and small flowering plants. 2 wolves flanked its entrance, their posture alert and watchful. They lowered their heads slightly as Kieran approached. A gesture of respect, I realized. "Wait here," he instructed, pausing at the entrance. "The elders wish to speak with me first." "Elders?" I asked, anxiety sharpening my voice. "Kieran, what is happening? Why am I here?" For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then his expression softened slightly, and he reached out to touch my pendant, his fingers brushing against my collarbone in the process. The brief contact sent a jolt of warmth through me that had nothing to do with fear. "This stone marks you as one who was chosen, Ilara, one who belongs to both worlds. The elders will want confirmation of what I already know to be true." Before I could ask what he meant, he disappeared inside the structure, leaving me standing awkwardly under the scrutiny of the 2 guard wolves and what felt like the entire pack watching from a distance. I resisted the urge to fidget or back away. Whatever test this was, showing weakness wouldn't help me pass it. The russet wolf, Thorn, had remained outside with me. He sat a few paces away, his amber eyes never leaving my face. His expression, if wolves could be said to have expressions, deeply skeptical. "I saved the pups," I told him, feeling slightly foolish for speaking to a wolf as if he could understand me, yet somehow certain that he could. "I meant no harm to them or to your pack." Thorn's ears flicked forward, the only indication that he had heard or understood my words. But something in his posture eased slightly, the aggressive angle of his shoulders relaxing into a more neutral stance. From inside the elder hall, I could hear the low murmur of voices, occasionally rising in what sounded like heated debate. My name was mentioned several times, along with words in a language I didn't recognize, something ancient and guttural that resonated in my chest like distant thunder. The waiting stretched on, the sun climbing higher in the sky, beating down on the clearing with unexpected warmth for the season. Just as I was beginning to wonder if I had been forgotten, the voices inside fell silent. A moment later, Kieran emerged, followed by 3 elderly figures, 2 women and a man, dressed in simple garments of undyed linen embroidered with symbols I didn't recognize. Their faces bore the marks of great age, deeply etched lines, thinning white hair, yet they moved with surprising vigor. Their eyes, like Kieran's, held that same otherworldly blue glow, though subdued by the daylight. "Ilara," Kieran said formally, "these are the elders of the Silvercrest pack. They have agreed to witness." "Witness what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The oldest of the women stepped forward, her sharp gaze assessing me from head to toe. "You wear the heartstone," she observed, nodding toward my pendant. "Given to you by one of our blood, my grandmother," I said, confused. "It was her most treasured possession." "As it should be," the woman replied. "I gave it to her myself when she chose to leave our pack and live among humans." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "What are you saying?" "Your grandmother was born Lyra of the Silvercrest," the woman said, her tone matter of fact. "My youngest daughter. She fell in love with a human man and chose to follow him into your world. It happens, from time to time. The call of the heart cannot always be denied." My mind reeled. My grandmother, a wolf shifter. It was impossible. I would have known. I would have seen some sign. Yet even as I protested silently, memories resurfaced. Grandmother's unusual strength despite her age, her uncanny awareness of approaching visitors before they knocked, the way animals always seemed drawn to her, the way she had taught me to move silently through the forest, to sense changes in the weather before they occurred, to trust instincts that others dismissed as superstition. That would make me... I couldn't finish the sentence, the implications too vast to grasp. "Quarter blood," the male elder supplied, usually not enough to trigger the change. But sometimes, when the bloodline is strong, he glanced at Kieran, something meaningful passing between them. "The pups," I said suddenly, understanding dawning. That's why they responded to me, why I felt that connection. I looked at Kieran, whose expression remained carefully neutral. "That's why you came to my cottage. You sensed what I was. I sensed what you could be," he corrected. The potential that lies dormant in your blood. Potential for what? I asked, though I already suspected the answer, impossible as it seemed. To become one of us, the second female elder said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was gentle compared to the others. To claim your heritage and join the pack. The ground seemed unsteady beneath my feet. Join the pack. Become one of them. A wolf shifter, able to change form at will, to run through the forest on 4 legs instead of 2, to belong to this secret world hidden within the one I had always known. It should have sounded like madness. Yet some deep part of me, the part that had always felt different, separate from the villagers, more at home among trees than people, recognized the truth in their words. How? I asked, my voice barely audible. Kieran stepped forward then, closing the distance between us. Through the heartpool, he said. The source of our power, where the boundary between forms is thinnest, and through a choice, freely made. His eyes held mine, intense and unreadable. My choice, as Alpha. And yours, as the one who is chosen. What choice? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. You speak in riddles, Kieran. The oldest female elder, my grandmother's mother, my great-grandmother, made a sound that might have been a laugh. She has Lyra's directness, she observed. Good. There is no place for hesitation in what lies ahead. Kieran's eyes never left mine. The heartpool can awaken what sleeps in your blood, Alara. But the transformation is dangerous for one with so little of our lineage. You would need an anchor to this world, a connection strong enough to guide you back from the between place. And that anchor would be you, I guessed, pieces falling into place. He nodded once. As Alpha, I can forge a bond that would tether your spirit during the change, but such bonds are not formed lightly, nor broken easily. His voice lowered. They last a lifetime. The implication hung in the air between us. He wasn't just offering to help me transform. He was offering something deeper, more permanent. A connection that went beyond mere assistance. A mate bond, the male elder clarified, perhaps sensing my confusion. Rare enough between full bloods, almost unheard of with a quarter blood. It would bind your life force to Kieran's, allowing him to guide you through the first transformation and all those that follow. And if I refuse? I asked, needing to understand all my options. Then you return to your cottage and your human life, Kieran said simply. No harm will come to you. You would be recognized as kin, protected but separate. The pups would visit you, he added, his tone softening slightly. They've already formed an attachment. As if conjured by his words, movement caught my eye. From between 2 smaller stone structures trotted the wolf pups I had saved, now looking healthier and more energetic than when I'd found them. The injured one's leg was completely healed, I noticed with amazement. They bounded toward me, tumbling over each other in their eagerness. I knelt instinctively, and they rushed into my arms, their small bodies vibrating with excitement. As they licked my hands and face, something loosened in my chest at their obvious joy, at the pure, uncomplicated affection they offered. They remember, I murmured, stroking their silky fur. They knew what you were before any of us, Kieran said. Children often see truth more clearly than adults. Looking into the pups' bright eyes, feeling their warm bodies against mine, I was struck by how right this felt. This connection to creatures who were both wolf and more than wolf. Had some part of me always known? Had my grandmother guessed what might await me when she pressed her pendant into my palm with those enigmatic final words? I rose slowly to my feet, the pups circling around me, nipping playfully at the hem of my dress. How long do I have to decide? Until sunset, the gentle female elder said. The heartpool's power waxes with the rising of the moon. If you choose to attempt the transformation, it must be tonight. Only hours to make a decision that would alter the course of my life irrevocably. It seemed impossible. Yet what was the alternative? Return to my solitary existence on the edges of a village that had never accepted me, always wondering what might have been. I would see this heartpool, I said, straightening my shoulders. Before I decide. Kieran nodded, as if he had expected no less. Come, he said, extending his hand to me. After a brief hesitation, I placed my palm against his. His skin was startlingly warm, the contact sending a jolt of awareness through me that made my breath catch. His fingers closed around mine, strong and secure. And something inside me settled at the touch, like finding solid ground after being adrift. He led me away from the elder hall, deeper into the settlement, the pups trotting at our heels. The pack members we passed watched with undisguised interest, murmurs following in our wake. I caught fragments of conversation. My name, Kieran's title, the word chosen, repeated with varying degrees of disbelief and speculation. "They're talking about us," I observed quietly. "They haven't seen me hold hands with a woman in a very long time," Kieran replied, a hint of wry humor in his tone. "Much less a human woman." "Half human," I corrected, testing how the distinction felt. His hand tightened fractionally around mine. "Yes." We followed the stream that bisected the settlement, walking upstream toward where the valley narrowed between steep, forested slopes. The path grew rockier, the vegetation more lush and wild. The sound of rushing water grew louder, and then the trees parted to reveal a sight that stole my breath away. A waterfall cascaded down a sheer cliff face, plunging perhaps 30 feet into a perfectly circular pool. The water was crystalline, so clear I could see the smooth stones lining its bottom despite its depth. But what made it truly extraordinary was the color, a luminous blue-green that seemed to glow from within, as if the pool itself generated light, rather than merely reflecting it. "The heartpool," Kieran said softly, "the source of our power, and the center of our territory." I stared, mesmerized by the play of light across the water's surface. The air here felt charged with the same energy I had sensed throughout the deep forest, but concentrated, almost tangible. My pendant grew warm against my skin, responding to the pool's presence. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "And dangerous," Kieran cautioned. "The waters can heal or harm, depending on one's bloodline and intent. For you," he hesitated, "the challenge would be significant. Your human blood fights the change. Without an anchor, you could lose yourself in the between place." "And with an anchor? With you?" I asked, turning to face him fully. We were still holding hands, I realized, the contact feeling increasingly natural. His eyes, that uncanny blue that matched the pool's glow, held mine steadily. "With me, you would have a path back, a connection to follow when the waters try to sweep your consciousness away. But it would bind us, permanently. It wasn't a question. Yes. No evasion, no sugarcoating the truth. Our lives would be linked, our well-being entangled. What harms one would harm both. And what of..." I faltered, uncertain how to phrase the question delicately. A corner of his mouth lifted in that almost smile I had glimpsed before. "What of love, Alara? Is that what you're asking? Whether a mate bond requires it?" I nodded, heat rising to my cheeks. "Traditionally, yes," he said. "Mate bonds were formed only between those whose hearts had already chosen each other. But in your case, the bond would serve a different primary purpose: survival." He paused. "However, I would not offer this if I felt no pull toward you, if I did not see something in you worth binding my life to." The simple honesty of his words struck me more powerfully than any flowery declaration might have. Kieran saw something in me worth claiming, worth protecting. This fierce, powerful alpha who could have chosen anyone from his pack. "And what do you see?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His free hand rose to touch my face, fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with surprising gentleness. "Courage, compassion, strength you haven't yet recognized, and something else, a wildness that calls to mine." The touch of his hand, the intensity of his gaze, the raw truth in his words, it all combined to make my heart race, my breath quickening. This connection between us, whatever it was, had formed in mere days, yet it felt ancient, inevitable. Like something written in my blood long before I was born. "I need time," I said, reluctantly stepping back, "to think." He released me immediately, respecting my need for space, of course. "The elders will show you to a place where you can rest and reflect. I'll return at sunset for your decision." As he turned to leave, one of the pups, the formerly injured one, whined and pressed against my legs, clearly reluctant to be parted from me again. "Stay with her, Era," Kieran told the pup, his tone gentle but firm. "Keep her company while she decides." The pup. Era yipped happily, settling at my feet with obvious contentment. Her sibling looked torn, glancing between Kieran and me as if unsure where his loyalty should lie. "Go with your father, little one," I said softly. "I'll be fine with your sister." The male pup seemed to understand, trotting after Kieran as he strode away. I watched them go, struck by the parallel to the choice that lay before me. To follow or to remain separate, the gentle female elder approached as Kieran disappeared among the trees. "Come," she said, her voice kind. "I will show you where you can rest." She led me to a small stone dwelling near the edge of the settlement, simply furnished but comfortable, with a bed of soft furs, a clay pitcher of water, and a low table holding a wooden bowl of forest fruits. Era followed us inside, immediately making herself at home on the bed. "My name is Serena," the elder said as I sat beside the pup. "Lyra, your grandmother, was my cousin. We grew up together before she chose to leave." There was no judgment in her tone, only a wistful fondness. "She never told me," I said, the hurt of that omission still fresh, "about any of this." Serena sat beside me, her movements graceful despite her age. "She was protecting you, child. Knowledge of our kind can be a burden in the human world. Better you should live in ignorance than in fear of discovery. But the pendant—" I touched the stone at my throat, "a precaution. A connection to your heritage, should you ever need it." Serena smiled sadly. "Lyra was always far-sighted. She must have sensed the potential in you, even if she hoped you would never need to embrace it." "And now I must choose," I murmured, "with so little time to understand what I'm choosing between." "The heart knows what the mind cannot grasp," Serena said simply. "Trust it, as Lyra would have advised." After she left, I lay back on the furs, Era curling against my side with a contented sigh. The events of the past 2 days swirled in my mind, finding the pups, meeting Kieran, discovering my grandmother's secret, and now facing a choice that would determine the course of my life: to remain human, living on the fringes of a society that had never truly accepted me, or to embrace this new world, this heritage I had never known existed, binding myself to a man, a wolf, I barely knew. Yet did I truly not know him? From the moment our eyes had met through my cottage window, I had felt a recognition that defied explanation, a certainty, bone-deep and inexplicable, that our paths were meant to cross. I drifted into sleep with these thoughts, and dreamed once more of running through the forest on 4 legs, the sense of the night rich and complex in my nostrils, the earth flying beneath my paws. But this time, I wasn't alone. A larger wolf ran beside me, his coat silver-black in the moonlight, his presence a steady comfort at my side. I woke to Era's wet nose nudging my cheek. The light in the small dwelling had dimmed. Sunset was approaching. My time for decision had nearly run out. Rising, I splashed water on my face from the clay pitcher, smoothed my hair, and straightened my dress. Whatever choice I made, I would face it with dignity. Outside, the settlement was quieter than before, most of the pack having retreated to their dwellings for the evening meal. I made my way toward the heartpool, drawn to its serene beauty as I contemplated the path before me. Kieran was already there, standing at the pool's edge, his tall figure silhouetted against the sunset sky. He turned as I approached, Era bounding ahead to greet him. "You've made your decision," he said, reading something in my face or posture. I nodded, coming to stand beside him. The heartpool glowed more intensely in the fading light, its blue-green radiance beginning to pulse with the rising of the first stars. "Before I tell you," I said, "I need to know something. Ask." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "If I choose this, choose you, what would it mean? For us, beyond survival, beyond the transformation." His expression softened, the fierce alpha giving way to the man beneath. "It would mean you would never be alone again, Alara. It would mean a partner at your side through whatever lies ahead, someone to share your joys and sorrows, to hunt beside you beneath the moon, to sleep curled against you through winter nights." He paused. "It would mean, in time, perhaps more pups of our own." The simple, honest vision he painted made my heart ache with sudden longing. A family, a place to belong, a purpose larger than myself. And the pack? Would they accept me? Some already do, he said, nodding toward Era, who was playfully chasing her tail at our feet. Others will take time, but as my mate, none would dare challenge your place among us. I looked out over the heartpool, its waters calling to something deep within me. My grandmother's pendant pulsed warmly against my skin, as if in encouragement. I choose to become what I was meant to be, I said quietly. I choose the pack. I choose you, Kieran. Something fierce and joyful flashed in his eyes. He stepped closer, one hand rising to cradle my face. Are you certain? Once done, this cannot be undone. In answer, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more. Heat and hunger, and the promise of belonging. His arms encircled me, strong and secure, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly known. When we finally parted, both breathless, the moon had risen fully above the trees, bathing the heartpool in silver light that mingled with its own blue-green glow. It's time, Kieran said softly, his forehead resting against mine. Hand in hand, we approached the water's edge. Era watched from a respectful distance, her bright eyes reflecting the pool's glow. Beyond her, I saw that the elders had arrived silently, along with several other pack members, gathering to witness what was about to occur. The mate bond must be formed first, Kieran explained, facing me beside the pool. It will anchor you during the transformation. From within a pouch at his belt, he withdrew a small knife with a handle of polished bone. With a swift, practiced motion, he drew the blade across his palm, opening a shallow cut that welled with dark blood. He held the knife out to me. Understanding what was required, I took it, its weight unfamiliar in my hand. Summoning my courage, I drew the blade across my own palm, wincing at the sharp sting. Kieran took the knife back, returning it to his pouch before reaching for my bleeding hand. Our palms pressed together, blood mingling, and he spoke words in that ancient language I had heard in the elder hall. The words seemed to vibrate in the air, to sink beneath my skin and flow through my veins, and then I felt it, a connection forming between us, like a golden thread binding my life force to his. I gasped at the sensation, at the sudden awareness of Kieran's presence not just beside me but within me. His strength, his fierce protectiveness, his carefully banked hope. Now, he said, his voice husky with emotion. The waters, still holding my hand, he led me into the heartpool. The water was surprisingly warm, embracing rather than shocking, rising to my waist as we waded toward the center. Moonlight streamed down upon us, turning the droplets on Kieran's skin to liquid silver. Remember, he said, his eyes holding mine. Whatever happens, follow our bond back to me. I will be waiting. Before I could respond, he cupped water in his free hand and raised it to my lips. Drink, he instructed. And then submerge completely. The waters must claim all of you for the change to begin. The liquid that touched my tongue tasted of moonlight and wild herbs, of secret places and ancient power. It coursed through me like fire, setting every nerve alight. My vision blurred, the world around me dissolving into patterns of light and shadow. Kieran's hand was the only solid thing in my universe as he guided me gently beneath the surface of the pool. Water closed over my head, and with it came darkness, not the absence of light, but a different kind of seeing. I was aware of my body dissolving, my consciousness expanding to fill spaces I hadn't known existed. Pain laced through me, bones shifting, skin stretching, senses sharpening to impossible acuity. I was lost, adrift in a void between forms, neither human nor wolf, but something unmade, unfinished. Fear gripped me. I would be trapped here forever, a half-thing, belonging nowhere. Then I felt it, the golden thread of the mate bond, pulsing with Kieran's presence, steady, unwavering, a beacon in the darkness. Follow me back, his voice seemed to whisper, though no sound could exist in this place. Remember who you are. Remember what you choose to become. I focused on the thread, gathering my dissolving self around it, using it as an axis upon which to rebuild. Bone and sinew, heart and lung, fur and fang. The pattern was there within me, written in blood I had inherited from my grandmother, awakened by the power of the heartpool. The pain intensified, then suddenly released. I surged upward, breaking the surface of the pool with a gasp that became a howl as my newly formed muzzle lifted toward the moon. Kieran was there, already transformed, his massive silver-black wolf form waiting at the edge of the pool. His blue eyes, unchanged by the transformation, watched me with a mixture of pride and wonder as I swam toward him, my movements awkward at first, but quickly becoming instinctive. I emerged from the water, shaking my coat, silver pale like my human hair, sending droplets flying in all directions. Everything was different, scents more complex and informative, sounds sharper, the world around me vibrant with information my human senses had barely detected. And most extraordinary of all was Kieran. His presence in my mind a warm certainty, our bond a living connection through which emotions flowed freely. His joy at my successful transformation washed over me, along with something deeper, a tenderness that made my heart swell. From the assembled pack came a chorus of howls, acknowledging what had occurred, welcoming me into their ranks. Era bounded forward, nipping playfully at my legs, her excitement bubbling over. Kieran moved closer, his large form dwarfing mine, and gently bumped his muzzle against my neck in a gesture of affection. Through our bond, I felt his silent question, "Are you well?" In answer, I pressed against him, letting my emotions flow through our connection. Wonder, gratitude, and the beginnings of something that might, with time, deepen into love. Together, we turned toward the forest, the pack falling in behind us. Kieran led the way, and I followed at his side, not as his inferior, but as his chosen mate, his equal in all things that mattered. As we reached the tree line, I paused, looking back at the heartpool where my old life had ended and a new one begun. The pain of transformation was already fading from memory, replaced by the exhilaration of running on 4 legs, of belonging to something greater than myself. Kieran waited patiently, his blue eyes meeting mine in perfect understanding. When I was ready, I turned away from the pool and followed him into the moonlit forest. My forest now, my home, my destiny. Ahead lay a lifetime of nights running beneath the moon, of days spent in the companionship of the pack, of challenges I couldn't yet imagine but would face with Kieran at my side. The future stretched before us, unwritten but full of promise, and as we ran together through the ancient trees, our paws falling in perfect unison upon the earth, I felt my grandmother's approval like a warm breeze against my fur. She had known, somehow, that this day would come, had prepared me as best she could for the heritage that slept in my blood. "The forest will protect those who protect it," she had said. "It's in your blood." At last, I understood what she had meant. At last,